everyone, I'm Erin and welcome to the Cardboard Republic. We are coming to you this week with a +5 range video. So this is a video in which we will take 5 games that are pretty popular and suggest some less well-known alternative titles. Our theme for this week is Spiel de Jahres winners. As you may or may not know, the Spiel is the most prestigious prize in gaming. It's given out every spring by the German games media, and it is the best thing you can get for your game as a designer. This past year, it was given to Codenames. We are going to look at some previous Spiel winners and find some alternative titles that carry on with the idea of the game, but maybe give you something a little different to play with. Our first game is 2015's winner, Colt Express. This is an interesting game because so much of it is in the physical presentation. The game is comprised of a bunch of train cars, and you actually build them. They're 3D, and your little meeple go inside the train cars, which is really cool. A lot of attention and care was put into the design of the materials for this game. The actual gameplay is pretty simple. You program different actions. So you set ahead of time what you want your actions to be each round, and then they're revealed, and you see sometimes things get a little messed up and you can't take the action that you thought you could. A huge part of the game, in addition to the physical components, is being able to accurately predict the moves that your opponent is going to make so that you can plan around those at the beginning of the round when you're selecting your actions. For an alternative to this game, we are going to suggest Fresco. Fresco is another game where you sort of program your actions. You have to put your workers out at the very beginning of the turn, and then things may or may not be resolved in the way that you want them to. It's all about building an Italian fresco, and the game itself is beautiful. It's really stunning and it's really well made. So if you like the fact that Colt Express had really great components with a relatively simple design, Fresco builds upon that, takes it a little bit further. It's a little more difficult, a little more thinky, but at the same time, it keeps that core of visual appeal with interesting programming gameplay, where you really have to think out your turns ahead of time and try to predict what your opponents are going to do. On the other hand, if you want to go like the total opposite direction, if your favorite part of Colt Express is just how off the wall it can get, Walk the Plank. Walk the Plank is like a short, tiny little game about being really dumb pirates. You program all your actions before. All you want to do is keep like one pirate alive, and it is super difficult, but it's silly. It's a game that I always say, if you're playing to win, you're playing it wrong. It's just purely about having fun and kind of just seeing what happens. So check that out, maybe with kids. It's just really cute. Next up is 2014's Spiel winner Camel Up, or Camel Cup, depending on where you are in the world. In Camel Up, which is what it's called here in my house, you are racing camels, but even more importantly, you're betting on a camel race. Every round, you roll a bunch of dice, and the dice are rolled in this really cool little pyramid thing, and you like press a button and it like lets the dice out. Anyway, it's really confusing, and it's really difficult for me to actually do, but people love it. So Camel Up. Every round you roll these dice, you move the camels stack on each other. You've probably seen pictures of it if you haven't played it yourself. You can bet on where camels will be every round, but even more importantly, you're trying to bet on how the race will end, which camel will be in the lead. The biggest part of this game really is the betting. The camel movement is fun and it's engaging, but really, the way you're gonna win or lose this game is by how well you predict camel movement, which is probably never a sentence I've said before. As an alternative, we are going to suggest World's Fair 1893. If you know me, you know that I am physically incapable of describing World's Fair 1893 in a concise set of sentences, but I'm gonna try for you anyway. So World's Fair 1893 is a game set around a Ferris wheel. The whole board is like a Ferris wheel, which is pretty cool. You are competing with your opponents to take control of the different exhibits at the World's Fair. To do this, every round you put down your little colored cubes in different areas. It's an area control game, and you pick up the cards associated with that area. Cards let you do certain things, or they give you points, you know, typical area control sort of thing. The cards you pick up all mean different things. So some of them get you tickets, some of them get you people that give you special actions later on in the game. You move a little car around the track to symbolize the rounds. Ultimately, whether you get VP or money, it's like worth the same thing, which is confusing, but that's okay. It's way less confusing than this description. Okay, hopefully you got that. World's Fair is very light and it's very colorful. It's relatively easy, but not too easy. So it's kind of on par with Camel Up that way. Also, and most importantly, World's Fair has you leveraging short-term goals against long-term goals. You need to make sure you're in control of each exhibit that you want at the end of that particular round. You also need to try to be in control of the most exhibits for the end of the game. So you have to balance putting your little cubes here to get control right now versus putting them there to get control for later on. And that's a very difficult decision to make sometimes. Similarly, in Camel Up, you're trying to figure out who's going to be in the lead this round and betting on them, but also who's going to come out ahead overall. It's that same deal where you're trying to figure out the long-term cost of whatever decision you're making now. I think that it's a good progression. It's maybe a baby step. It's not super obscure. It's not super old. World's Fair is actually a relatively new game, but I think that if you like Camel Up, you're going to find a lot of the same things in World's Fair with a little more meat on its bones. The next game we have is 2013's winner, Hanabi. Hanabi is a game about making fireworks, but the theme doesn't matter at all because really what gets you with Hanabi is the way you hold your cards. In a normal card game, you obviously have a hand of cards and those cards face you. You can see them. You know what's on them. In Hanabi, you have a hand of cards and those cards face all your opponents. You can't look at them. That's the catch. All of the players have to give each other clues to try to tell them subtly what is in everyone's hand. Players then have to choose a card that they have and put it down in the center. If they've done well, they're working to build sets. If they've done poorly, they just, I guess, set off a bunch of fireworks and everything explodes and it's bad news. Keeping with the idea of an interesting way to hold your cards, we decided to go with Beyond Baker Street. This is a new game, but it's a good alternative to Hanabi because you hold your cards the same way. Since that's the most memorable thing about Hanabi, we figured it was good to carry that through. In Beyond Baker Street, you are a group of detectives competing to solve a crime before Sherlock Holmes. To do this, you have your hand of cards that you can't see, and you all have to give each other clues. The catch, and what makes it a step beyond Hanabi, is that every clue you give also helps Sherlock. So you have to try to solve the mystery in as few clues as possible. Hanabi also has some time limit things in there, but none are quite so blatant or quite so challenging as in Beyond Baker Street. I think it's a good step beyond Hanabi if you love the basic gameplay of Hanabi, but really want to maybe throw an additional little twist into it. Now we are going to jump backwards in time a little bit to 2003. The Spiel winner in 2003 was Alhambra. This is a tile-laying game about building a Spanish village, I suppose, for lack of a better term. You are collecting tiles from a center board and putting them out in front of you. The catch is that all of the tiles have to connect to your central fountain square. And You also have to make sure that the wall that goes around the edge of them is as long as it possibly can be. You can't move your tiles after you initially place them, so it can be very challenging and tricky to try to find a good layout that doesn't block you in, but still gets you a lot of points. We decided to stick with the idea of being able to totally block yourself out of the game, so we chose Arboretum as an alternative. In Arboretum, which is a beautiful little card game, you are trying to lay down trees in a sequential path. So you have a handful of cards, all of the cards are different trees, and all of those trees have a number. You get points for connecting trees that have the highest number, the highest separation between them. The thing that makes this a lot like Alhambra, a lot like the tile laying aspect of Alhambra, is you can block yourself out really easily. And you can't move your trees once you plant them. So you have to be super, super careful about how you lay down those cards to begin with. And you have to be willing to think ahead at least a few moves, if not the entire game, to plan out the best route between two different trees. So that is Arboretum, and it builds on the whole idea that you get in Alhambra, where you have to try to lay down your tiles to build the longest wall. Now we're going to go back in time even further to 1983. The Spiel winner in 1983 was Scotland Yard. This has since become a classic game. And the real key thing that we want to hone in on here is that the gameplay is asymmetric. So one player is playing Mr. X. They are a thief who is trying to escape the law. The other players are detectives for Scotland Yard. All of the players are moving around London, taking different forms of transportation to get here, there, everywhere. Mr. X is a little tricksy though, because their movements are secret for the most part. Mr. X does pop up occasionally and give some hints, but overall, their movements are hidden. The players who are playing detectives have to try to deduce where Mr. X is based on where he was the last time he popped up and where he could have gone since then. The real key, though, is that the two players, or two teams of players, I guess, are playing the game differently. They are not just opposing but equal forces. Mr. X is one solitary player darting around the city, and he has to abide by his own set of rules. The detectives also have their own set of rules. Sometimes these overlap, but not always. For our alternative game, we decided to go with the deduction aspect of Scotland Yard, and so we chose Incognito. This game came out only a couple of years after Scotland Yard itself, but it was largely overshadowed by Fury of Dracula, which was another huge asymmetric game. Incognito was just reprinted though, so it's kind of getting its second wind. The catch is that Incognito has to be played with 4 people exactly. It says you can do it with more or less, but don't. This is another game that forces you to try to figure out not where someone is, but who someone is. In Incognito, all of the players are attendees of a beautiful Venetian masquerade ball. You are trying to pass secrets to the other player on your team. The catch, of course, is that you don't know who that other player is. So when you are at a location with another player and you get there by, moving using this little guy, which is creepy, but cool, but creepy. So when you get there, you have to try to use deduction skills to figure out if the player you are with is on your team or not. Again, like Scotland Yard, this can be a little challenging or not even that fun for some players. Not everyone loves deduction. I actually am not a huge fan of deduction games. A lot of them involve lying, which I'm super bad at, even though Incognito doesn't. But if you are into deduction, mystery solving, that sort of thing, especially social deduction, trying to figure out what the other players are thinking and who they are, then Incognito is definitely one you should try. Okay, so those were the Spiel winners for the past few years and then some years before that. and some alternatives. There were a lot of different mechanics that we explored in this one, which was really fun, but also really challenging when we were planning it, because trying to hone in on what really is the essence of a game like Scotland Yard or like Camel Up, and what games carry that forward or take it to the next level. That's what we tried to capture with this, but I'm curious what you all think. What's a good alternative to Camel Up or Alhambra? What's a good game that you can play once you've mastered that? Let us know down in the comments. Also, if you like what we're doing here, and I hope that you do, please hit subscribe and hit like down below. We have a Patreon, which we are always looking for more support for because we love doing this, but all of the expenses come out of our own pockets. So thank you so much for watching, and we will be back soon with another video. Bye!